Hello and welcome to Get the Gist podcast. I'm your host, Ruban Phukan, co founder and CEO of Good Gist. We help businesses automate their email workflows and enable intelligent document processing using agentic AI. In this podcast, I talk to industry leaders to understand their current business processes and challenges, and we explore what are the challenges that comes in while leveraging emerging technologies like AI and incorporating that into their business. So today, my guest is Kenneth Christie, who is the CEO of VTS Consultants. Ken has over 20 years of experience in sterile manufacturing in the positions of QA, commissioning, qualification, and validation management. His experience in dealing directly with FDA and foreign regulatory inspectors on aseptic processing issues, along with performing audits on medical device companies for ISO compliance and certification. He provides reviews on aseptic processing procedures and processes and offers recommended improvements to meet FDA expectations to foreign firms. And welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate it.
That's great to have you here today. And I really look forward to the conversation to understand the challenges of the pharmaceutical and medical industries. So, just to begin, can you talk a little bit about yourself and what does VTS Consultants do?
As Ruben mentioned, my background is 20 years of aseptic manufacturing. I was responsible for the production of every biological and viral vaccines that we take as children, but also the vaccines that we take today, such as rabies, flu, and smallpox. And my company, we provide consulting services to the pharmaceutical, medical devices, and cosmetic industries. And in talking with Ruben with regards to AI, there is a tremendous benefit that these industries can use, but there's also challenges that many people don't realize because of a lack of understanding of the regulations that are applied to the manufacturing of drug products.
So let's start with the sterile manufacturing, right? Or which is also known as aseptic manufacturing processes, which is so crucial for some critical products like vaccines and cosmetics and drug manufacturing, right? So for the benefit of the viewers, can you please explain a little bit more of what that entails? And what are the crucial challenges that companies face in this domain, right? And how is technology leveraged and how can technology help in some of this processes?
Okay, the biggest thing about aseptic or sterile drugs is the fact that FDA has regulations that dictate to the companies how you have to assure that your drug processes, the facilities in which the drug is made, and also the environment where a sterile product is manufactured is both controlled and maintained during the entire manufacturing process. The challenges that companies face today in terms of what the FDA would like to see and where technology is now incorporating in the design of equipment is to eliminate the use of personnel doing the manipulations to make the drug product. Today, when I was in manufacturing of sterile products years ago, robotics was not part of the environment or the technology available. Isolators, which are pieces of equipment that completely eliminates an operator from touching the drug product, from touching the containers where the drug is filled into, and maintaining an environment that's completely free of human interaction. And the greatest source of contamination for a sterile drug is having an operator around the containers that are being filled, having an operator around the sterile solution you're trying to fill into a vial or a syringe or a tube, and controlling that environment to eliminate that potential for contamination. The technology today is advancing to the point where operators are being kept out of that, what they would refer to as the sterile environment. And when the FDA comes to audit a sterile manufacturing facility, they are looking for exactly that. They are looking for the design of the equipment. Their focus tends to be on any process where an operator is around the drug product, because the greatest issue with a sterile product is the fact that when we would make 75,000 or 150,000 vials of flu, you take a certain statistical number of samples, you test it for sterility, you test it for potency, and if everything passes, then you have the assurance that that those 100,000 vials are sterile, and you ship it out to the public. The problem with a sterile product is you don't test every vial. You test a very small statistical sample, and if something would go wrong, if a spec is not met, then the question becomes, what is the level of assurance that those 100,000 vials that I have not tested are truly sterile when they're shipped out the door? And to the FDA, years ago, if you did not document everything that was done, who did it, maybe a time at which it was performed, if it was not documented and capable of being shown to an inspector, the attitude was it never happened. So today, technology is now keeping operators from having access to the filling process. You have technology that is now eliminating the need of people to manually write a result, and everything is being recorded by automation. How fast the machine was running, what was my average fill level, what was the amount of pressure applied to a stopper to push it into a vial. All of those characteristics have specifications, and in the past they were manually recorded or displayed on a machine and manually recorded on some type of form. Today, technology is now having sensors taking that data, plotting it, giving you average fills, average pressures, whatever it might be. And the FDA, while they are pushing for it, now has a concern with the ability of an operator to manually change the values recorded by the instrumentation. Do I have access to those equations that are figuring out my average fill levels? Do I have access to that data that is recording a time, a weight, or a pressure, and can I change it without somebody knowing it? And as Ruben and I had been talking in the past, it's amazing to find out that companies today still will manually change or alter data that failed to be able to ship it out the door. And in many cases, the FDA will find out about it during an inspection if they are clever enough to find out what to look for. So that's what our company helps our clients try to do, to make sure that the processes are defined, that the documentation is accurate, it's legible, and can be taken back to a person who performed it. If any of those items have a weakness, then the question of sterility assurance is debatable, and the FDA will challenge you to prove it.
That's very, very interesting. And it's amazing that we typically go and take a flu shot and don't even think about how much goes behind, not just in manufacturing, but in assuring that what gets delivered and what we take has the right quality. So it's really amazing to know everything that goes behind that. From that perspective, and you and I were discussing this a little while back. So for some of those, because these are like data driven analysis, and as you have said, that companies sometimes they change the numbers and publish those records. Do you see, say, technologies like AI getting used in detecting some of those discrepancies automatically and helping FDA?
I think that's a great question. And probably within the pharmaceutical industry, where AI is probably being used the most currently would be for the evaluation of new drug components that pharmaceutical companies are trying to develop for cancer or for whatever disease is a public problem to try to overcome. To get a drug to market, the FDA requires several years of clinical studies, and there are three levels of clinical studies. But a third level clinical study or phase three clinical study is when the new drugs are administered to volunteers. You have a control group that gets a sugar coating or a placebo. Nobody knows what they are getting, but you have a tremendous amount of data that needs to be analyzed to say, if I use this chemical composition, will it affect the body's normal makeup and cause a reaction? In the past, those analyses would take months, sometimes years, to go through an endless evaluation of every chemical composition that, number one, that drug could be manufactured to have versus the chemical composition of the body. You know, the idea that I can inject anything into my body and nothing happens is never true. And the drug might work for me, but it might not work for Ruben. Since we talked about flu vaccine, Ruben might be allergic to eggs. Well, if you're allergic to eggs, you can't take the flu vaccine simply because that's where the antibodies are grown in the amniotic fluid of a live chicken embryo. So, technology today, AI today, is capable of running thousands upon hundreds of thousands of chemical compositions and coming out with what works, what will not work. That is probably where the advantages of AI are today in clinical studies because it is not yet a drug and you are doing an analysis of so many chemicals on so many different people. And you're also looking at what happens to that drug combination over a period of time. Because clinical studies can range from 2 to 3 years, and you're constantly collecting data at different time points. And to manually do that would just add an absorbent amount of time before a company would feel comfortable to submit the data to the FDA, who now does its own review of the same data to see if there's an issue with it. So AI's advantage today is the speed at which chemical compositions for new drugs can be analyzed. It can save companies hundreds of millions of dollars and several years of research if they have a better understanding before they start such trials.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a lot of conversations that we come across, we talked about the positives of AI, right? So, what can AI help, right? But and like we were discussing earlier, there are significant challenges in getting AI into businesses or business processes, which are so much regulated and there are so much risk factors involved. So, what are the challenges that you see in AI adoption, and what is the right way to approach an industry like pharmaceutical and biotechnology?
I think to answer the question that Ruben had, and it is an issue that companies or even developers have to realize within the manufacture of a drug product. Number one, the FDA wants to make sure that the data that I provide them is sufficient to tell me that it is safe, that it is effective, and that it provides the benefit that I am claiming in my advertisement and in my description of the drug. The problem, as we mentioned earlier, is because all of this data now is being absorbed into a machine that collects, analyzes, summarizes, and gives you a final result, which is then used to determine whether or not the product is shipped out to the public, is controlled by a computer program. The challenges are, in the eyes of the FDA, and rightly so, that they need to verify and prove to me that that data is accurate, that somebody or the program is not taking a value and rounding it up or changing it. Number two, they have to make sure that the data what they call like an audit trail. What time was that value performed? Who did it? And can I retrieve it without altering the value that got recorded? So, the big challenge with AI, as with most technology today for the manufacture of drugs, is the integrity of the data. And the integrity of the data is I need to know who did the analysis, what time, what was my value, and if somebody can access that data, I need to know who it was, what time did it happen, and what was changed, added, or deleted. And that is what's referred to as the audit trail. And as I mentioned earlier, that is the challenges that the FDA is facing today with the technology of new equipment. Everything is now automated. And the question is, to what degree of safeguards has been built into that software to keep me from changing a value that Ruben is going to be looking at later on to make a decision as to whether or not it's acceptable. If I'm the FDA and Ruben makes a change, the technology in that program has to be able to be specific to Ruben and has to be able to tell me what he did, when he did it, and why. So, software programmers today, the first question they will ask is this for the pharmaceutical industry? Because if it's for the pharmaceutical industry, there are regulations that are referred to as Part 11 in the regulations CFR 210 to 11. And that deals with computer systems, the integrity of the data, how the data is supposed to be organized, how it can be retrieved, and so on. That's the first challenge. I think the second challenge is Companies who employ AI have to have people that understand it. And if you have a problem with it, are they able to correct it? Because if you are manufacturing a drug product and something happens with your program, you basically stop your manufacturing process, and the data that you have or the data that you need to release it, if it's lost, you just lost the product. And so companies today, if I'm the software manufacturer, I can tell you what it can do, but you as the company must have an internal staff that understands it, how to correct it, or how to address issues that will definitely arise with it. And finally, the last challenge is if I have a drug on the market, we mentioned flu. If I manufacture flu, the FDA has approved a specific process that tells them what equipment I use, what are my parameters, the facility that it's being made in, and the environment that I have to control. If I want to bring in new technology, new equipment that incorporates I cannot change my process until I have sufficient data that new technology works as it was designed. I have challenged it and I have summarized everything for the FDA to take a look at. The whole process could take a year, 2 years, and I don't have the right to change my process until the FDA reviews the new technology that I want to take advantage of. And in the drug world, time is money, and many companies do not want to wait a year, 2 years to implement technology that would save them money in the long run because it's too much time for the documentation that has to be assembled. And that's the reality of the matter. So, those are the three main challenges.
No, this is great because to get an insider perspective of how things work, because from the evolution of AI and with all the hype around AI, it's very hard to, I mean, it's easy to say that AI is fit into everything and will improve every business process, which it will for sure, right? But there are critical steps like you have outlined. So first is education, where first people in the organization need to know about what AI is and how it will get used. Second is the not having a black box of an AI, right? Having explainable AI that works, right? The data sanctity, because of course you cannot have AI do whatever manipulation of the data, right? The data has to be very, very well maintained and the audit trail of everything that is happening. So, yeah, I mean, these are really very important aspects that as technologists, we need to focus on before we can say that, yeah, AI is ready for every use case and in every industry.
Correct.
So these are really great point. So I mean, VTS works with some of the biggest names in pharma, biotech, cosmetics. So these are all similar, but again, they are different industries in themselves, and their internal processes or how they define things are very, very different. So how do you tailor your solutions to meet the specific needs of such diverse industry?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as consultants, we can't dictate to a company what they need to, what they should do, or how to do it. Basically, what we provide is we will look at what they are doing or what they are proposing to do and evaluate it against what the current regulations are, and often do what we call a gap analysis to say, if you want to bring in AI in this particular aspect of your manufacturing process, That's great. I'm all for efficiency and reducing the cost of products, but there are always challenges. For every advantage, they claim there's one disadvantage. So we come in and the client tells us what they want to do. We do an evaluation to say, if you go this route, this is what you must make sure happens. You can't change your process and simply go to something brand new without the gathering of data to justify it. You can't change your current process to a new process. You are committed to follow the outdated technology. As bad as that sounds, that's the reality. So, in our case, the larger deep pockets pharmaceutical companies are buying the technology that has AI in it. They're going with, especially today with the advent of new drugs, AI is becoming vital to do the data analysis because that's what gives companies the ability to determine, is this drug worth pursuing? Realizing you're looking at 7, 8, 10 years before it gets approved. COVID was an exception, but AI, in terms of its abilities to do the analysis that is associated with any chemical drug makeup, that's where the benefit is.
Mhm.
So we just help clients with assuring that the level of documentation is sufficient, that they are abiding by the current regulations that deal with computer systems, and that they have control over access, the integrity of the data, and so on.
No, that's a really great point, and it's important to understand also all the regulatory requirements, and because regulations are changing as well at a rapid pace as technology is also evolving. So
Correct.
ensuring that what is being built and how businesses adopt to the new technologies, but at the same time be compliant with the new regulations that are emerging is really critically important. Um, so one question that I ask everyone, and this is close to what we do at Goodgist, right? So as consultants and as you work with a large number of organizations, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the discussions, a lot of the documentations also happens through emails, right? So in your line of work, right, how important is email processing automation, right, or intelligent document processing, so that as consultants, rather than having to go through each and every email, understand the context, extract information from the documents that are being shared, right? And then basically presenting those information back to your clients. Is that done manually? And how do you see technology like AI playing specifically in those areas?
It was funny when Ruben and I were talking earlier. I told him I am not an IT person. So the technology that is out there today to streamline documentation, which is the basis of any drug product today, is not only amazing, but it's to a point where it's almost growing more rapidly than what we are able to understand. And when you lose an understanding of technology today, you are at a disadvantage to be able to determine what is good, what could be a problem, and so on. And that's why I went back to say the challenges are to have people that understand the technology. In our case, my company does not manufacture a product. We do not run clinical studies. We do an analysis of what your current systems and processes and facilities are. However, what we are looking for are things that we can recommend to a company, to our clients, to improve the efficiency of what they have. There are companies that we have worked with that have a tremendous or a high percentage of waste. And when you start looking at the reasons for waste or failed product, that could be something that technology could eliminate, then that's where the recommendations to go to AI become important. And we help clients to look at pros and cons, benefits and efficiencies that are to be gained. Because we all know the drug world will never end in this country. Number one, the advances in medicine today are incredible. And some of the data that I am looking at for clinical studies on new drug just has me sit there and think, this is amazing that somebody could come up with a drug that will do this. And yet you realize it's a multi-year project before it ever becomes reality, if it does, based on clinical trials. But for our case, AI is going to help us eliminate a lot of the paperwork that up until now has been common. Volumes of paper are maintained by pharmaceutical companies and anybody in the drug industry because it has to be documented to be reviewed. Today, paper is becoming a thing of the past, almost like cash is, because everybody is using a credit card. Today, everything is stored on a computer, and that's where data recovery, backup systems are getting to be so critical today because everything is electronically stored. And that we are seeing it happen. Companies are doing away with paper to capture their manufacturing process, which is fine. But then you get back into understanding data integrity. What happens if my program gets a virus and I lose all that data? If I don't have a data for every vial of medicine that I make, it has to be destroyed because you can't defend a problem that might happen with it later on. So we are trying to incorporate AI as much as we can, but you have to learn how to crawl before you can walk. Simple
Absolutely.
way of putting it.
That's a great point and a great message. When it comes to adopting emerging technology, you absolutely have to learn how to walk, how to crawl before you walk.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, last question here today, Ken, is you have been in the industry for a long time. You have seen how the consulting industry has evolved over years, right? So, what advice would you give to young professionals who are looking to enter into the consulting field today and in the realm of all the emerging technologies? Because there's a lot of talk around how AI will reshape consulting industry as well.
I think I think that's a great question, and you have to give me a minute before I give you an answer. Based on what I have seen, and even today when I read inspection reports by the FDA, realizing it's 2025, not 1980 or anything else, the first thing I would tell people is you have to have a mentality to assure that quality is put into any drug that is sold. I have seen companies, I have done investigations for clients over with a supplier that they didn't understand why something happened. And when I went out to do an audit, it became obvious what happened. And yet, I don't think the drug was ever recalled or taken off the market. That gets scary. And we all know from a business standpoint that companies have to make money to survive. But when the thirst for money overrides safety and quality, you have to have an old school mentality that quality cannot be overlooked regardless of the cost. Number one. So if you are not somebody that believes that things should be done right, that if I have failing results, that they are not manually manipulated and changed, because those are the people that the system will buck. Nobody wants you to be a quality person, and I do not allow that drug to be shipped out. If your attitude remains that, in some cases, I think you would end up getting fired. I hate to say it, but we can see that in our daily activities with different companies. So, having an honest attitude, and if things don't go right, you stand your ground and make sure that it's right or it doesn't go out the door. The second thing that I would tell people entering the industry is, with technology advancing at the rate that it is, the learn to understand it and focus on data integrity issues, because that is continuing to be probably one of the 10 most common areas of deficiency that the FDA is seeing with every company that they audit, regardless of whether or not it's in the US or abroad. And if you understand the technology, you're going to become an extremely valuable resource that companies are going to need in the next couple years. That's the
That's
best I can
amazing.
answer that question, because it could be all over the range.
No, absolutely. But that's amazing advice. And I think that's very helpful for young professionals. I think with technology, it gets easy to get carried away and say that, yeah, I mean, let technology do what it can. But sometimes it's important to go back to the basics and say that, yeah, there are certain guiding principles that you cannot negotiate, right? Come what may.
At least we like to think that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or that's the hope, right? Given this industry is just so critical and lives are at stake, right? To put
That's
at least. So
Yep.
that's so important. So, Ken, it was really an honor to have you in the podcast today. You shared some really great insights from that industry. You gave some really great thinking points, right, for anyone in the technology world who is trying to build solutions for this industry. So, really great having you, and thanks for giving us the time today.
It's been my pleasure, Ruben. You're a great person to talk with, and hopefully the listeners out there will find a benefit to what you and I talked about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Ken, and thanks everyone for joining today.
You're welcome.